as Gabe said, the game is scary. But it's rewarding, and the plot is compelling. There's like, the creators were really intentional with, as you said, leaving like these story skeletons and like leaving a story in a world that's super immersive and has so much to like learn about, even if what you're learning about is really sad. And it's compelling in the way that it's like believable in a lot of ways. So the use of player choice is something that really does make it impactful. As I said, like more like D&D. So I just want to geek out about that. Like, I really love these games. They're really fun. If you haven't played them, I think they're fun enough to play, or at least like watch someone play, because the story is interesting enough. But this game is not unique necessarily, other than like the gameplay mechanics, in that it connects back to like honestly any apocalypse scenario in witnessing what people and systems will do in a state of crisis. Half the votes were dedicated to just seeing what people do, you know, in chaos, for fun, for science, you know.
For kids.
And how people will cope with such unfathomable disaster. The show and the game complement each other, I think, in that they further develop the lore. And most apocalypse media, it doesn't get away from the pessimism. Like, there's still a lot of like, oh, people are gonna suck. People suck. And it doesn't entirely ignore, but does somewhat ignore like the way that disaster utopias exist. There are people who will do good and act good, it's a choice at the end of the day.
And I will say the show gives us a teaser of that it has existed in the background that maybe we didn't know, with the existence of the settlement that like was rebuilt, and like there's a whole city that was living its best life because humanity is resilient.
And they show it in the games. It's in the first one, I'm pretty sure, the Shady Sands you just happen upon, and it's like a part of the storyline. And it's like there are pockets of humanity that are still doing good, but there's still, as you said, like a fair amount of pessimism that comes, like the wasteland will change you. So the show doesn't change from the game that much in that, but you do get like more. You get Lucy, who is just like such a sweet, genuine, authentically kind human, and her choices are not only just well intended, but unlike many of her fellow vault dwellers and honestly the other characters on the show, she has a self-awareness to acknowledge her own failings and like course corrects. Isn't like, oh, I made a mistake, let me double down that was the right choice, even though it clearly wasn't and harmed a lot of people. She's like, oh, actually, maybe that was bad, and next time I don't do that, and I'm gonna question that and like look at that for the rest of however long I'm alive. She like adjusts and course corrects, which shows a lot of like character depth, and I think like something I appreciate about the show is like her brother's like a very good contrast to her brave altruism, but like shares her self-awareness. But he's like, oh, I know that I'm not brave.
Yeah, I'm not brave.
I'm going to hide in this bunker, and I'm going to feel really bad about that because I know that was an ancient move, and I get that. And I'm going to try to make up for it. But like, I get that I'm not the brave sibling. You're going to go out into the world and do stuff, and I don't like it, but I know who I am.
And I'm like still not going to settle. Like, I'm not going to blindly follow.
Yeah. So there's like recognizing, like meeting people where they are at kind of in their apocalypse journey. But as I said, there would inevitably be disaster utopias, hope within the chaos and upheaval, where like the intent of Shady Sands, people would band together to build pockets of hope across the wasteland, and that those do exist, and that they absolutely, like anything else, have the opportunity and chance to be corrupted by power, but that those little pockets of hope do exist. Like you kind of see it in the Minutemen, like you and the fourth game, where like you have like they made a big mistake, and then you have to course correct and make better choices and help like build stability. And there are like pockets of stability throughout the wasteland, and then also pockets of ew. Wow, why did they do that, people? So yeah, the game, like any apocalypse scenario, shows humanity's great capacity for good versus harm, and how it's all about what you do in times of crisis and in times of normal. So we kind of explore all of that, and it's really fun. So either way, there would be countless people lost to fallout itself, and that's what I'm going to get into and unpack. And radiation in general would likely shorten human life expectancy exponentially. So what would radiation at that level seen in Fallout series do to our bodies? And like historically, we do have context for this: Chernobyl, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Like there's unfortunately been real human examples of this and devastating ones. But in the outcome of like multiple bombs dropping across like the entirety of the world, what would happen? So an article titled "Here's How Life Would Actually Mutate After Nuclear Fallout" from BBC's Science Fiction or Science Focus, written by Tom Howarth, they highlight the ways fallout would impact the world. There are real locations to base these results on, as I said, but the most common impact of fallout is an inhospitable landscape. The article said the main impact of ionizing radiation on DNA generally leads to mutations ranging from minor changes to severe health issues like cancer and cataracts. There are very rare possibilities of developing advantageous mutations like anything else. Evolution is random. So an example of this is seen in the darker skinned tree frogs found in Chernobyl's exclusion zone, which developed in tree frog populations found there to help protect against radiation-induced oxidative stress. So essentially, the tree frog population evolved to be more resistant to radiation. Another reaction to the Chernobyl incident is the radioactive boars found in Europe in 2023, and not in the fallout way, like they don't have like 3 heads, but essentially they're just boars that look normal but have unusually high radioactivity levels that show up in their meat samples, and essentially they're brought up specifically because, as we see in the game, radiation would inhabit all food sources. And there would be mutations within the food sources that would inevitably impact humanity because we have to consume food to live, and water to live, and that all of those things would be impacted by these chemicals and radiation, that even if we survive the fallout itself, our food sources will have been irradiated. So we would inevitably take on a certain amount of radiation every single time we eat, and that could have long-term health risks. So this could impact food sources into the future, with people consuming unsafe levels of radioactive material. Overall, the message is clear: radiation from nuclear disasters has severe, long-lasting consequences for both plants and animal life, making affected areas inhospitable for living organisms. And despite some instances of beneficial mutations, they are the like exceptions to the rule rather than the rule. And the likelihood of gaining superpowers from radiation exposure is essentially non-existent. There is the chance of like humans in general developing like as a mutation resistance to radiation. That is a possibility, but like extending past that, it's not like we're going to become the next like Static Shock or like how like they whatever superhero falls into like a vat of radioactive goo and comes out. That's not what's likely to happen. It is obviously in an endless array of possibilities. Sure, maybe one guy one human comes out with cool superpowers or ends up like a super mutant, but like it's very unlikely and not probably going to be what happens. If anything, we're just going to slowly radiate and get illnesses and progressively sick, drastically limiting our life expectancy to a point where it's like we're like before, where we live to 30 and then we're gone.
So we want to end up with the ghoul.
Likely not. It's a possibility. It happens to enough people. And I think the ghoul is just a play on like what happens to the human body in the close radiation zones, where like how the skin blisters and stuff like that in response to like nuclear radiation at like heavy levels physically, and then playing upon like you would survive that and have to walk around. That's what the ghouls essentially would be. So what would we want to do to avoid the worst outcome? In another article titled "Scientists Reveal Safest Countries to Survive Nuclear Apocalypse" on NDTV, there's like a handful of articles about this that like I don't know how accurate they are. They're all from like weird websites like MSN.com telling me where to live. I don't know. I don't trust that necessarily, but they listed some, and the logic behind it does make a little bit of sense. So they cover a study published in the Journal of Risk Analysis, which identifies that Australia and New Zealand, along with a few other island nations like Iceland or Solomon Islands or Vanuatu, as the best placed countries to survive a nuclear apocalypse and sustain their populations, mostly because of like the distance from other countries and the fact that some of these countries don't have nuclear programs.
Yeah, like they want to be a target.
Yeah, exactly. And the research focused on factors predicting survival after abrupt sunlight reducing catastrophes such as nuclear war, supervolcanoes, or asteroid strikes. And Australia and New Zealand scored high due to the robust agricultural production, geographical isolation from likely nuclear fallout zones, and strong infrastructure. Despite Australia's advantages, its close military ties with the UK and the US pose a potential risk. Conversely, New Zealand benefits from its longstanding nuclear-free policy. So
I will say, I still would weigh. Like, I guess it would take the existence of radroaches and mirelurks in the world for me to be like, yeah, I can handle one of the spider seasons in Australia where the whole town is covered in webs and full of spiders. Like, in that event, maybe
giant spiders, snakes in the house. Like, yeah, no, absolutely. It's already Fallout vibes.
Yeah, it's like
just without the radiation.
Nice. It seemed like a walk in the park.
Yeah,
they have huge crabs as it is already.
Yeah. Animals doing weird things. It's already kind of happening in that way. But as you said, absolutely, Gabe. I'm with you. But it's more likely that they would have less irradiated humans than the rest of the world. Essentially, the study suggests that even in the worst case scenario of a 61% reduction in crops during a prolonged nuclear winter, the study suggests that even in the worst case scenario of a 61% reduction in crops during a prolonged nuclear winter, New Zealand would still have sufficient food supplies. However, other island nations may struggle due to the collapse of industry and social cohesion. The study also predicts a significant food production reductions in major powers like China, Russia, and the US, necessitating the adoption of new food production technologies in the aftermath of a nuclear apocalypse. All of this to say is that the United States would be a bad place to be in the instance of a nuclear apocalypse. We've pissed off a lot of people.
Rightfully.
Yeah.
They would have every right.
Yeah. Do we want that to happen? Absolutely not. Like,
No.
the best way to prevent all of this is to avoid nuclear war. But
yeah, let's stop doing that. Let's not
at
watch
the end of the
movies that
day,
I don't like them either.
yes. But the big powers, the big three, I don't know, I love like anime, but it's like countries, essentially would they would not be the place you want to be at the time of nuclear apocalypse. So essentially, the ones that you mentioned, Gabe, China, Russia, and the US are the players currently in what they would anticipate being a part of like the nuclear situation if it was to take place. There are also articles speaking to the safety of Antarctica, as there are no nuclear sites there, but the risks surrounding cold and winter would still be
and
a
polar
concern.
bears.
Like, it's not the safest place to be. Like, people would still have a hard time. And also, like, what's in that ice? There's
and what do you eat?
That. Yeah,
a penguin. You monster. What is the war made of?
So, yeah, it's not like people die from winter now. Like, it's not gonna.
Yeah.
So it's just unlikely. Like, we don't have the skill sets to be able to survive and hunt. And like, specifically, like if we were to go up to Antarctica tomorrow, like I do not have the skill set. Speaking for myself, do not have the skill set to survive nuclear winter or regular winter without like the structure of plants that are
like in society. Yeah. And also, just fun fact, World War Z, the book, they end up like Antarctica is a safe place too because the corpses, the zombies would freeze and they can't move, and so you'd be safe.
Yeah. So
it's an option.
Disease spreads.
Just don't dig in the ice.
That's fair.
And let the thing happen.
But if we keep going down the line of like, there will be missiles, there will be bombs, this is there's a few other articles that kind of outline what that would look like. So in another article titled "Who Would Take the Brunt of an Attack on U.S. Nuclear Missile Silos" on Scientific American, this article delves into the potential consequences of a nuclear attack on specifically the U.S. missile silos, the ones that are buried in the ground, focusing on the environmental and human impacts. Most of these missiles are located in the Midwest, and the U.S. Air Force released a comprehensive report detailing the environmental effects of replacing all Minutemen missiles with new Sentinel missiles, which are like fancy new ones, by mid 2020 or 2030s. So that's like in the works now as part of a 1.5 trillion nuclear arsenal modernization effort. Love that for us.
Super important.
Yeah. Who needs food, right? Who needs groceries that are affordable? They're building their bunkers. It's fine. The missiles are vulnerable to attack, obviously, because they're fixed into locations. And also, there's an argument that their existence is an issue as well. The missiles are also vulnerable to attack due to their fixed locations, but the argument on their continued existence is based on providing fixed targets will exhaust enemy resources in the event of an attack. And they're also built in locations that are more like lightly populated. The issue seems to be more with the potential environmental harm that is caused by their existence in the first place. The risks for leaks and failures are kind of inevitable in the human experience. The article raises concerns about risks posed by the U.S. land-based missile fleet, including accidental releases of radioactive materials and detonation of warheads. So, like the chemicals leaking into the ground because they're buried in the ground, including essentially it calls for greater transparency from the Air Force regarding these risks because essentially the government's very tight-lipped. Overall, the article paints a grim picture of the potential consequences of living with land-based nuclear missiles and emphasizes the need for informed decision-making regarding their continued existence. Essentially, missiles in the ground is probably bad, even if it means that opposing countries would have a hard time getting rid of all of them. They leak into the ground and poison it. So, for example, like the radiated boars in Europe, got their radiation from the truffles in the ground because they're buried in the ground. Similarly, if you bury the missiles in the ground, it's going to poison the food sources that all the animals eat and the water sources that come from the ground. It's like a slippery slope into radiation.
It's like fracking. So fun.
Yeah. In another article on Mira safety titled "Your Nuclear Attack Map for 2023," they unpack the grim outcome of nuclear. It's all grim, just so you know. There's no like, yay, happy nuclear time. It's all bad. No one has a good time. They highlight the areas that would likely be hit first in an event of a U.S., Russia, and China exchange of nuclear warfare. There's also this like map to test what fallout would look like with the different types of bombs that already exist to get a more thorough understanding of what the impact of fallout in most major cities would look like. I spent at least 20 minutes clicking.
I would want to do that.
I already did it. I'd be okay, depending. It really depends on which ones they drop. If they're the big boys, no, we're all dead.
Yeah.
If they're the little guys, the little ones, then we're probably like you and me might be okay.
Okay.
But like you're still gonna get hit with like the air pressure and like the radiation wave. Like you have to stay inside.
I'll probably still lose my teeth.
Yeah. But you won't get blown up.
Okay, woo, yay.
You have the longer, slower ouch time.
Ooh, so fun.
No, it's bad. It's a horrible time all around either way. We know that from what it has already happened. It's effed up.
Yeah.
To say the least. It's a torturous way to go, and it should not exist. That's why we shouldn't glorify stupid films like Oppenheimer. But whatever. We're going to keep going. Essentially, we need to acknowledge the impact of these things and what that would really mean. But this little map thing essentially outlines what it would look like if these bombs that currently exist fell in certain areas. You could like pick and choose where they would go and like figure out where you are in comparison. And there was like this really horrifying video that showed like the trajectory of what it would likely happen if there was a nuclear attack from one of these three countries and how the other countries would retaliate essentially. So where would likely be targeted and where would face fallout? Essentially, first to go would be remote military installations initially targeted in the nuclear strike due to their strategic importance and relatively low population density. They would want less missiles to shoot, so they would shoot the places that shoot the missiles. Major cities would be next. Larger urban centers like New York, Chicago, Houston, Los Angeles, and San Francisco become targets as conflict escalates. Coastal regions, areas along the coast, particularly in California and coastal New England, are at risk for fallout due to their proximity to major cities and potential primary targets. Florida, the entire state of Florida is highlighted as facing significant challenges, with many residents likely rushing to evacuate in the aftermath of an attack. Eastern United States fallout affects most of the eastern United States, ranging from minor to severe contamination. So essentially, like wherever the bombs fall, like the radiation would get to us somehow. Either it's through rain, like natural weather events, in unnatural weather events, wind, etc. Birds flying it from eating irradiated worms and flying to where we are. Like radiation will find us no matter what.
Birds film real.
Yes. Essentially, like, no matter where they hit, it's going to have lasting consequences. Like, nuclear stuff maybe shouldn't exist. It's just my 2 cents. Western Texas, Nevada, Michigan, and Wisconsin, notably, would be spared from immediate fallout, but potentially uninhabitable in the long term due to nuclear winter and other consequences that impact weather. These zones represent areas where fallout is expected to spread rapidly across after a nuclear attack, leading to significant health risks and necessitating precautions and protective measures for those affected. Another possibility is that after an initial attack, the counterattack from both sides would face mass casualties, and the damage would be so horrifying that no further attacks would happen. Like, I cannot foresee, like, once you do it once, enough ouch,
and then they come back to you.
Yeah, it's horrifying enough that, like, yeah, they're not going to just keep shooting them off. In my opinion, I don't know. I'm not the person in the chair making the choice, but it just seems very unrealistic that they would just be like, yeah, sure, kill everybody. Like, the initial bomb would have enough of an impact and horrifying consequence that, like, I don't see why they would have to keep going. But as you said, people are petty, the rich especially. So, like, I'm not in charge. I'm not the one doing it. So maybe they are that awful. That's a possibility.
I mean, it's the mutually assured destruction that we face in the Cold War. Both sides. Luckily, we had reasonable people with the nuclear codes, reasonable enough to be like, there's no, like, if we start this, it's also ending it forever.
Yeah, and I mean, they did start it, but then they were like, oh, that was worse than we thought, I guess. And it's a whole thing.
Death.
A large contributor to the casualties would also be just from natural responses to the attacks, being forest fires, environmental catastrophes. Like, it would more be the aftershocks of what we witnessed than the actual, bombs themselves. And then additionally, there would just be loss of life from people just not knowing what to do, because, like, no one teaches about what to do in the event of an attack. So in these instances, there are resources available for educating yourself. And I'm going to, like, kind of run through them because it's, like, necessary to know what the heck to do if there is a nuclear explosion. And FEMA has a resource on this. We probably shared it in our other episode, so I'll try to go through it quickly. But the biggest thing that they say is get inside, stay inside, and try to learn of what's happening on the outside. Essentially, you just don't want to be outside in the instance of a blast. You want to get inside the nearest building to avoid radiation. Brick or concrete is best. Remove contaminated clothing, wipe off or wash unprotected skin, go to a basement or a middle of a building away from windows, and then stay there for at least 24 hours. And if you're away from your family, have everyone stay inside, keep your pets inside. And then essentially, if you have a radio, crank radio or battery powered radio, tune in for any kind of information to just see what's been hit, how long you're supposed to stay inside and for how long, and then decide from there, what is the next course of action? Do you have enough food for a few days to stay inside, essentially?
Yeah,
and
if you don't, get a ham radio, like a crank
radio.
Everyone should get one.
Yeah.
In a go bag.
Yes, absolutely. And then like essentially like recognizing like your tech is going to get impacted by this. So like radio is probably the only thing you're going to have. And essentially they just say like in the event of an explosion, try to prepare as much as possible. There's probably shelter locations when you're going place. It's not saying like live in paranoia, but like if you're outside, know where to go. If there's an emergency, have a plan of some kind for any kind of emergency, be it hurricane or other things, like environmental catastrophes, social catastrophes, like have a place to meet up with people that you love so that you get to stay inside and safe for as long as you can. And then to survive during, have a go bag, have like a certain amount of food if you can. I get it. Like groceries are horrible right now. They're making it very hard to have a backup plan, have a safety net of any kind. But having a few stock food items is something that would help. And yeah, just recognize that like it's airborne, it's probably in water, it's probably in like meat sources, and in ground-based foods. So coming up with a plan to maintain being alive with what you have available.
Let's say just for like a place to go. Most often, like older schools are marked as fallout shelters.
Yeah.
Like you'll see like the like little biohazard symbol and it'll say like fallout shelter.
Yeah, because during the Cold War, they did prepare a lot of schools to be that for their communities. And just like, it's a little bit of a distraction because like the world itself is so horrifying that like what the rich are doing, like we already know what we need to know that they suck and they need to go away. But there are articles outlining like what the rich people are doing right now with their money, and it's very similar to Vault-Tec, and it's Vault-Tec vibes, and it's gross. They also have another article. I kind of skipped ahead of it, but is followed a warning for a future global catastrophe risk expert weighs in, and it's on Vox by Sam Delgado, and it kind of just says what I just said. We're like, we want to avoid nuclear war. That's not the outcome we want. That's the best way to prepare yourself for nuclear war is to avoid it altogether. And that like, if it is to happen, go on websites like the FEMA one and learn, as Gabe said, go to the schools are likely a safe place, stuff like that. Having like a plan for if there's a big emergency is the thing that's going to help, because the risk experts, like, is it likely that nuclear fallout will happen? It's not an impossibility. It probably won't be the only way that we go, but like it is a possibility that it will take place, if not from bombs, but instead from like decaying and irregulated nuclear facilities that melt down and explode. But also the rich seem to be making moves for what happens after they've destroyed this planet, accounting for the possibility of nuclear fallout in the many possibilities of what will take us out. It's argued that this is just a failsafe, generally purchased with a small fraction of their overall wealth. This can be seen as more of a commentary on their disconnect that the rich have from basic human survival. In that they're like, I want to live forever. How can I do that? Buy some land in the ground. When we are considering groceries a luxury item and the world already feels like a dystopian nightmare, the rich building bunkers feels like a logical next step and not necessarily newsworthy. It's like we know they suck. We know they want us to eat cake. Like, like it's already happening. I don't need to know that Mark Zuckerberg has a bunker in Hawaii because of all the places. Ew. Like, so colonizer vibe. They're already doing it. We already know. But essentially, that is a thing. Mark Zuckerberg has a 100 million compound in Hawaii, which includes 5,000 square foot bunker, serves as an example of this phenomenon.
$100 million.
$100 million, yeah. And there is a significant increase in demand for such facilities, which companies like Hardened Structures or Vivos reporting a surge in inquiries and applications. These shelters are often equipped with advanced security features and amenities, with prices ranging from millions to tens of millions of dollars. And the article highlights the historical evolution of bunkers, the state-sponsored projects during the Cold War, to private ventures driven by wealth of the global elite. However, it also raises concerns about the narrative promoted by bunker building companies and emphasizes the importance of collaboration and community and preparing for potential disasters, because the rich people aren't going to do it. Like, they're the ones who are going to do the experiments in the vaults. Like, they're going to say, like, come join this vault, haha. And then they're going to do horrible things once people are actually in there. All of the dystopian nightmares that we see in video games have already been done to some section of an othered population in the world within reason. Like, maybe we don't have the technology that's proposed in the Fallout vaults, but we have experimented on human beings before in horrific and disgusting ways. So in another article, they compared the bunker and island grab as well as the resource hoarding as a flashback to feudalism, saying billionaires are building bunkers and buying islands, but are they prepping for an apocalypse or pioneering a new feudalism? And the article discusses a trend of billionaires purchasing properties with elaborate features like bunkers, sparking speculation about their motivations on whether they're preparing for something like we don't know about, or if they're just being assholes. And it's more the other one. The article argues that the billionaire projects extend beyond bunkers to encompass the creation of self-sustaining ecosystems on their properties. This trend, exemplified by Zuckerberg and others, reflects a shift towards a form of techno-feudalism where individuals control entire ecosystems akin to feudal lords. And essentially, like, some of this is like doomsday prepping, but for billionaires, it's more like a tiny little speck of all the things that they're investing in. They're also like probably likely, I don't know, I'm not in Mark Zuckerberg's ear, but like investing in things like to prolong human life and stuff like that, because like they know the only way that they maintain control is they're living longer. And a lot of the dystopian nightmares revolve around that idea, is that like they're putting their brains into robots like Roombas, or, you know, they're building AI that replicates their personalities to live on forever. You know, like it's the Fall of House of Usher, like her whole project was trying to like download the human consciousness into an AI so that she couldn't die and could escape consequences. So the idea is that like they're building bunkers. We should absolutely be concerned about that. But they're also doing a lot of awful other things that we should be equally concerned about. And Fallout, it's too real. I think that's like my only like ouch, like critique-ish thing about the show is like it is so real and it's happening right outside. And that's like, it's hard. I think it's like how some people have a heart. It's both a point of catharsis, but also like it's hard to watch some of these things take place because they're too on the nose. They're actually happening in the world. And instead of watching it playing a game, it feels ew when you're watching it because you could go out and do something about it. So it's complicated in that way. But the show is right. The rich are gross. They would absolutely do this. And contrary, there would be people like Lucy. There are people like Lucy. There's people like the people who founded Shady Sands. There's people like, you know, there's good, there's pockets of hope. And there are people fighting. And we see that every day on our phones, or we're there in the streets saying that the change needs to happen. So like it is happening. It's just, hopefully we don't get to the point where they decide to mutually assured destruction us, because they realize that society is banding together, so they want to the only way to win is to outlive us, is the whole message of the Fallout show, is that they know that they're losing, and the only way for them to beat their opponents is to outlive them by living forever cryogenically frozen in these walls.
Yeah. And I mean, like the alternate future where they take off in a spaceship is preferred. Like, do it right now while we can still make a difference. Like, take everyone with you, go do it, right? Before you've ruined it so much that it's irreparable. Because, right, I mean, it kind of is already. Like, we're at the point where we just have to soften the blow because it's happening. I was just thinking though, because I was like, okay, if rich people were like, oh, come into this vault to save yourself from the nuclear fallout, like even without the experiments, like in the fact that you're trapped in there for like them to do whatever they want, you're trapped in the underground. So I think I would not go because no, that sounds awful. I don't want to be in there. I don't want to be underground
Yeah.
and I can't see the sun and I'm stuck in there. I can't leave. I'd rather just go. I'd rather just be like, nah, let me move to New York so they take me out right away. I don't want to keep being here. That sounds
Yeah. No,
awful.
it's super valid that like the critique of the people who are in the vaults, like even within the game and the show, is that like they had some sort of privilege that the rest of the population doesn't. They were through wealth and status were able to buy their way into these vaults, and the vast majority of the population had to sit outside and get hit by the bombs and deal with the consequences that they were putting off for future generations to have to deal with. And they had been there rebuilding and making humanity continue, while the rest of them sat in their little vaults and did what they did. So I agree. Like, as awful as it would be, both from just like a statistical outline of like what will happen when the bombs fall, if they do, it would be better to be on the outside, because the people on the inside like aren't gonna build a better world either. Like, it's still colonizing what's left, you know?
Yeah. And if it's those are your people, right? If this is your heroes, you're just perpetuating the same thing. Like, we're just gonna get the same world and it'll end up in the same way.
Yeah, like war is gonna happen for who's left too.
Yeah, that's why war never changes, because they're still here.
Yeah.
People who do the war are still here. And that's definitely like what the show is. It's like, oh, we like the people who were different had a chance. Yeah. All that to say, it's a great game and show. It has goofy parts of it. It's very scary. Game. It's very big. It's very scary. But it builds a world that is interesting and hits very close to home, because as far-fetched as it can get, there are parts of it that really ring true because of what we know about the world and the people who are in it. But I do appreciate what you're saying, that there is disaster utopias. There are going to be instances of humans banding together and caring for each other and making a future. And I think that's like what a lot of people were missing in Fallout and all the different games, is like you saw the remnants of those things, but they're not super clear. And so it just feels really helpless. And so to see in the show that like there was a time where this was so robust, like that was a very clear next step to what was going to happen after that war.
And yeah, a lot of people from our generation only have played like Fallout 3, 4, and maybe New Vegas, but like the original games, a lot of people just graphically can't go back and play them. They're like 2D top down. Like, it's a very different vibe. So you like totally miss the Shady Sands kind of stuff. That like, it's kind of cool that the show picked it back up and was like, actually, look at the nice stuff that happened for a little bit.
And imagine if Vault 31 didn't exist and they never got out, then Shady Sands could have been living. Yeah. So we didn't freeze the bad people so they could be here in the end. Why would you want to be there? Because they want to be in power.
They want power.
They don't have enough power here now.
It comes back to power.
So gross. Well,
it's like the guy who's like a shoe salesman, but in the zombie apocalypse, he can be a leader.
Yes. Yeah. Which we talked about in Alice in Borderlands.
Yep.
Excellent. So that is our episode about Fallout TV show and a little bit about the game. Our next episode will be about The Last of Us. We've already talked about the game, so you can check out that episode about The Last of Us where Kat and I switch places, because I talk about how scary mushrooms are in real life and what parasites are, and then Kat talks about the video games. So it'll be fun to also talk about the show now. And subscribe, tell us what you like about Fallout. Which Fallout game is your favorite? Which vault do you think is the scariest and why? And would you even go into a bunker? So don't get married.
Delete your kids.
Yeah. Or they take your kids away from you and they kill you, and then your kids have to train to be the very best, but not in a fun Pokemon way.
Or they steal your kid and then is taken to a synth land and replaces the population of the Commonwealth with synth humans to spy on them. Spoilers for Fallout 4. Sorry.
Yeah, wow, spoiled me.
You beat it before.
I never beat it. I can't get there.
Okay,
it's too scary.
Well, now you know. Now you know what happened.
All right, bye.
Bye.